The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.
Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Go Boldly, the podcast where we celebrate women stepping into their power and living their most authentic lives. We are also thrilled to be a part of the Power Moms Network. At Power Moms Network, we are empowering moms and creating a community of mothers mentoring other moms to greatness. Very cool place to be. Check it out when you can. We would love to have you join us over there. Before we dive into today's topic, which I'm actually pretty excited about, we're talking about living authentically, what that has to do with writing your own story, which might be self-explanatory to some of you, but we're going to get into the weeds of it. And, we're also going to talk a little bit about main character energy and becoming the hero of your own story, which is all a lot of like big fad kind of words. But they do have some important meanings for us in this season of writing our own stories. So before we do that, I just want to remind you guys, we have our weekly women's circle. We would love for you to join us as part of our ongoing efforts to support I don't know, I don't want to call it the resistance because that seems ridiculous. But it is the resistance. So to support those of you out there who are fighting the good fight, working against like the destruction of democracy, not to be dramatic, anyone who's out there struggling, we're inviting you to join us for free this month. We would love to have you. You can just reach out to us via email or our website or social media. Let us know you want to join us and we'll send you the link, and we'd just love to have you there. So all of that being said, let me welcome Tova to the show, ask her how her main character energy is feeling today, and we'll dive into the topic. How are you, Tova?
Grading on a scale or whatever we're grading on. Fine, good. It's sunny.
Mm,
I kept this morning, we talked last week about my struggle to like figure out the nuance of like setting boundaries a bit with like even how much I share with my kids. Like, and I think you talk about this as well. Like our kids are older now. Like, I don't want it to be all doom and gloom, but like I don't want them to be surprised with the fall of democracy. Like I don't want it to
mm.
sneak up on them. And I felt I could feel myself last night kind of being like sucked a little too far in and being a little too negative. And I
Sure.
talked to my 13-year-old afterwards, and he's like, it's not that I don't want you to talk to me about it. I do want to be informed. I need to be able to push back against my friends who are wrong. And
Yeah.
like, I need to be able to talk to them. And he's like, and I know you need to be able to talk to somebody too. And I was like, but not you.
Yeah.
Like, I
That's
don't need
tough.
to
My
talk
daughter
to
does that. Yeah.
yeah, I said, I don't need to talk to you. And I said, I said, listen, I will be more cognizant. Um, but you can always say, hey, mom, I can't hear it anymore. And I said, because sometimes I will not be enough aware. Like, and that's not your job, but if I have lost the thread here, feel free. And he's like, I don't ever want to say that. I said, feel free to say it and I will stop. But to answer your question, I really made a concerted effort this morning to have a positive reset and to be like, okay, Friday threw me for a loop. Not gonna lie. Friday, in case you're wondering when you're listening to it, was the Oval Office ambush. Um, and so I've been kind of getting my bearings straight. And so this morning when I woke up with boys, I'm like, it's a beautiful day. It's March. It's sunny. Like, let's bring some light into this dark world. And
Yeah.
so that is, what I'm trying to do today.
I like it. I
Yeah.
think you and I have talked about this a lot, and I'll get into some definitions and things for us in a second, but we've talked a lot about hope, and we didn't coin the phrase hope is resistance by any stretch of the imagination. Other folks said that way before us. But it is true that hope is a form of resistance, but hope is also an action, right? Like it's an action you take. It doesn't just get handed to you. Just like love is an action, like all these things are verbs, right? You've got to do something for yourself to get to the point where you feel hope, where you feel hopeful at all. Otherwise, like we've talked about, you get in this doom spiral and in the pits of despair, you're not able to kind of pull yourself out and take action, which is what we all need to be doing right now.
Yeah, before you get to
Yeah.
your definitions, just to add on real quick, because I'm so bad at remembering to tell people's names and I have them all in front of me. So I have been little by little reading the book Democracy in Retrograde, and I
Mm-hmm.
had gotten it before the election, and then we know what happened at the election, and I kind of threw in the towel for a while with the book, but I've been listening to it again. It's written by, I don't know if it's Sammy Sage. I feel like that's probably not the right way to say any of those words, but and Emily Amick. Um, Really, the only word I know is right is Emily. But she is Emily in your phone on
Mm-hmm.
Instagram. And she talks a lot about hope. And she quoted in a bit ago, but when I was reading the book, Miriam Kaba, who is a activist that focuses on prison reform, among other
Mm-hmm.
things. And she said that hope is a practice.
Yeah.
And that really spoke to me. I clearly wrote it down in my little notes app. And that I just, we talk a lot about like the practice of gratitude. And it really spoke to me like it is a muscle that you have to work. And, that's a little bit what I wanted to do today with the boys. Like,
Mm.
let's work that muscle. Let's practice it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that just I wanted because I had the names and I never have names for people. I
Yeah.
wanted to highlight them.
And they deserve to be
Yeah.
have attribution. Let's put
Yes.
it that
So
way.
let's get to these definitions.
Yeah. So, interestingly, in doing the research on authenticity and more important, like beyond authenticity, because we've talked about this at length in various seasons, and I think it's become a buzzword that people tend like and it's become a buzzword for so long that it's at the point where people start to ignore it, and it becomes overused, right? And so, interestingly, in doing the outline and doing the research and thinking about this, I did focus more on like main character energy and like the hero's journey and all of those things, which is a whole literary process of writing. Um, but I did also ask AI, which is ironic, I think, in that we're talking about authenticity. And I asked a robot to tell me how to talk about authenticity. But I think it's interesting to kind of undertake that practice because then it makes you look at yourself, right? Like it makes you look at like, is this really what I think? Is this something that I believe? Is this
Right.
like, am I being authentic while I'm using this robot to help me think? So anyway, I'm just noting that because one, I want to be transparent, and two, I think it's an interesting line of thought to consider. And you and I, Tova, have been talking about AI quite a bit lately, and what we think is good and what we think is not so good. But what it came up with were some questions. So I did like this. And I think the problem, of course, is that it didn't, as we were just discussing, it didn't attribute these questions to other people, though I am sure this is other people's work. And I wish I had the names to quote because I don't like feeling like maybe I'm taking somebody else's work and not acknowledging that. So, but when we're talking about understanding authenticity, it gave me this list of questions, which I think are worth discussing. And the first one is, have you ever felt like you're living for someone else or holding back your true self? And it goes on to say, what would it feel like to truly embrace who you are without fear of judgment? What if you were the main character in your own story and every step you take is a victory? And I found those really important in the sense that it made me stop and reflect more deeply about authenticity and not just thinking about it in terms of like surface level. I'm going to bring my whole self to the table and
Mhm.
I'm going to be who I am and screw everybody else because this is who I am, right? It's more thinking about being true to yourself, expressing your genuine beliefs, your values and identity without the fear of judgment. And sort of one thing that I think we all struggle with is aligning our actions with our beliefs, right? Those
Yeah.
that doesn't always line up for people. In fact, it rarely does. There's lots of studies out there that tell us that. But it's crucial to figure out who you are and how to be that person in real life in if you want to build meaningful relationships, if you want to have, good self-esteem, if you want to promote your own growth, if you want to create an inclusive environment, around you. That's another like
Yeah.
huge component of the process. So all of these things are what authenticity is about. And in addition, it's what, main character energy and being your own hero and all those things are about.
A couple of things. So one thing I think, and we've talked about this, we had a great episode and conversation about belonging
Mm,
and the concept of inclusivity, like, and we talked a lot about it in the workplace. And, we talked about interesting that we're having these conversations now as companies are backing away. And some companies, let's be honest, are not backing away and
right.
leaning towards diversity, equity, inclusion because they know it's better for their bottom line and humanity, but also their
Right.
bottom line.
Yeah.
Um, but this idea of wanting people around you to be authentic, um, you can't not be authentic yourself and ask the people around you to be themselves and be authentic. Like you
Right.
have to be willing, as hard as it might be, even if you can't bring all of yourself to the table, to at least bring as much as you can to the table. If you're asking other people to do the same thing. So I think that's interesting. Also, when you were reading these questions, and I've looked at your outline before, so I should have known what was coming. But the question I had in my head was, have you ever felt like you're living someone else's life?
Yeah.
And I think that's a similar question to some of this of like, how did I get here? What happened?
Right.
Where did I, go left when I meant to go right? Or I
Yeah.
would have
Well,
gone
and
right.
we all know the Talking Head song, right? Like, This Is Not My Beautiful House. Like, it is something, I think if you are even remotely self aware, these are things you've had pop into your head at some point in time. Right. Like, that you're, am I living my own life? Am I being myself? Like, am I pretending? Am I in this social setting and I'm just trying to fit in? And sometimes you have to, right? Like, there are times
Sure.
where that is required. You've got to do it and it's fine. I've been there. And then sometimes you fake it because you're like, I'm so uncomfortable and I'm just going to fake this situation. And that's okay. It's not ideal all the time, but like, we have to take care of ourselves, right? And if that's what you need to do for yourself in the moment, that's okay. The goal is to get to the point where you feel comfortable in your own skin. You feel like the life you're living is your life and not one that someone else wanted for you or that you thought you wanted because you saw someone else doing it and you're like, "Oh, well, that's what I should be doing." Right? Like the goal, the end goal of all of this is that your daily existence is something you believe in. It's something you want to honor.
Yeah, and I think there's a level of awareness that's really important. You just went out to breakfast with some friends this weekend, and what you
Hmm.
described it as, these are people that I don't have to think about what I say.
Yeah.
And I think we all have these people in our lives that we really like spending time with, or even like we have to spend time with because they're parents. Like I have people where like I enjoy their company, but I watch what I say and I'm careful what I say because we have to exist in this world together. We live in the same town together. We
Yeah.
exist. Now, I don't let certain things slide, obviously. Like I'm not a nice white lady, but like I, but we exist in the same community and our kids go to school together. And so I do keep an eye on what I say. But then there are these other group of people where you don't have to. And I think that it we recognize that like in every single scenario, you won't be able to say exactly what you want to without thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I think having the awareness even of like this feels different is a huge step of recognizing your own authenticity.
Yeah, and I think it's also a huge step of maturity, right? Like recognizing that you're not trying to fit in, you're trying to belong
Hmm.
is and trying is the wrong word for belonging, right? Like you just do, you belong.
Yeah.
Um but I think that's a maturity factor as well because I know certainly when I was in my teens, 20s, maybe even early 30s, I was trying to fit in all the time. I was like, "Oh, like I guess I'll adapt to fit this group because I want to be somewhere. Like I want to have friends. I want to like interact with other people." Um, and maybe it's something about like you turning 40 and being like, I don't really want to interact with anyone anymore. But like that, I grew out of that. Like I aged out of it almost, but I also worked out of it, right? Like I put in a lot of work to get past that need to fit in with a group. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So it takes effort. So there's a lot of detail here about authenticity and what it is and what it isn't. I want to though like really talk about how we embrace our authenticity. Like how do we get to the point where when we're writing our story, when we're living our lives, it becomes more natural, like we were just talking about, right? Like, what was that work I put in so that I could get to the point where I was like, okay, this is who I am. You can like me, you can not like me, whatever, it's cool. Um, and 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 the reality, just to check that for a second, the reality is that's not how I feel every single day, all day, right? There are
Right.
days where I'm like, can you just like me? Like, just like me. But then I think the majority of the time I'm like, I am who I am, and you like me, you don't. I'm always learning, I'm always growing. It is what it is. Um, but yeah, so how do we what's the work we do? Um, and we've talked about so many of these things before that you're all probably like enough already with the journaling and the meditation and the like self-reflection. But honestly, like nothing is better for you than self-reflection in this context.
Yeah.
Maybe a therapist, right? To help you reflect. Um, but journaling, meditation, asking yourself meaningful questions like we just started with is one of the key components to getting to the point where you have those moments where you identify, hey, I'm not really being myself right now. Like, and why? Right. And is it something I need to be doing? Or am I just afraid of being judged? I'm afraid of being rejected, whatever your fear is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, a big thing has been identifying not just when I don't feel comfortable, but identifying when I feel comfortable. Like I've always been very good at being like, oh, this does not feel good. Sometimes ignore it, but I recognize like this does not feel good. But I've been less aware or able to say, oh, this does feel good. And so many of my signals in my body have been telling me like I'll be like, "Oh, well, I don't feel bad. So this must feel okay. This must be a good decision because it doesn't feel bad." And I know we've had people on who have talked about like having tingles when something like feels good or
Yeah.
they feel like almost like the magic of like, "Oh, yes, that was the right decision." Whereas I'm like, "Well, if I don't have a pit in my stomach, it probably was a good decision." But I think that as you do those steps of whether it's journaling or self-reflection or meditating or honestly just having more open conversations with the friends that you do feel comfortable with, so you can talk it out a little bit and get those words out, or talk to your dog about it, whatever works for you, or your cat. I don't want to, not talk
Don't
to
leave out the
Tiger.
cat people.
Yeah, not talk to Tiger. Um, but I think that if you have more awareness, you do start realizing when you feel good, not just when you don't feel bad. And
Yeah.
that can help you tap in without having to put yourself in negative situations.
Yeah. And I like that sort of flipped around concept too of like it's easier, and you've said this many times, it's easier to add something in than it is to take something away, right? Like you say that in a multitude of contexts. And I think it's a really important point for people because doing this is hard. And so like any way that you can make it easier for yourself, I think is good, right? Like it's a helpful thing to do. So if it's easier for you to start to add in places where you just bring your whole self to the table, where you bring your whole self to the party and you're like, this is me. I'm, and with the understanding that there are days where, your whole self is like grumpy or tired or exhausted or like anxious or whatever, and then there are days where your whole self is probably joyful and happy and upbeat and all those fun, happy words that we love. So one thing I just want to reiterate throughout this conversation is being authentic is not pretending to be happy all the time or acting like everything is fine or like people pleasing. That's not authenticity. That's, I don't know, that's making it more comfortable for everyone around you, I think. Whereas
it's pretending.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of times I think, not to pick on our younger sisters, but like the people out there on Instagram, like promoting the healthy, happy lifestyle sometimes forget that like, yeah, we're allowed to have bad days and you're still okay. And you're still a good person and you're still doing things in an authentic and meaningful way. Like it doesn't mean you can't have a bad day and if you're having a bad day, you're allowed to express that. Right. I think that's where people get hung up. Like, yeah, okay, I can have a bad day, but I'm going to hide away from the world, which is fine. Like sometimes you want to do that, but like it's also okay to express it, to be like, whatever's happening is terrible and I'm really upset and it's hurting my heart, right? Like you can put that stuff out there. It's okay.
Yeah.
Let's
and well, I was just going to say, you can also be sad on really happy days.
Yeah.
And you can be happy on really sad days. Like, because for me, it's less that there's one day that's all of something.
Yeah.
It's minute to minute, hour to hour, where the feelings go back and forth.
For sure.
And there is figuring out, especially in this weird timeline that we're in, and that we've been in for almost all of our lives, like figuring out, like, how do we do this? Like, how do we, go about our lives every day and do the things that we're doing and find the joy? But then also, how don't we do it? How wouldn't we find the joy? Like, I know I think yesterday I shared how I have wondered how we go about and do our work and do our podcast and do our circle and all of those things during this difficult time. And the more I think about it, I think like maybe it's those things that are making it possible to get through this difficult time, like taking this time to have the conversations and finding things to celebrate and the light in the darkness and joy. And it makes it so you can keep going back and keep doing the work that you want to keep doing. And the community. And I know we really, really need to take a break. But I know that part of the conversation with authenticity has to do with you need to be vulnerable to be able to be authentic. And both of those things are necessary in order to find that place of belonging and find that connection, which we have talked a lot about over the last few weeks is so important when you are writing your story. And when you are the main character of your story or the hero of your story, you are not the only person in your story. You are one of many people. And it's important that you cultivate that group that helps you be the hero. So with that, we should probably take a quick break because it's been a while. And then we can come back and keep having this conversation. Talk a little about some more things to do to help figure out your most authentic self. We'll be right back.
Well, hello there, ladies. Are you ready to elevate your life and connect with like-minded souls? Join us every week at the Go Boldly Together weekly Women's Circle, where strength meets sisterhood. Dive into empowering discussions, share your victories, and navigate challenges together. Our circle is a safe space for growth and inspiration. Experience the power of collective wisdom and unleash your full potential. Don't miss out on the transformative energy. Click the link in our show notes or visit us at goboldlyinitiative.com/women's weekly group to learn more about our Go Boldly Circle today. Together, let's embrace the journey of personal development and let's celebrate that unstoppable force within each of us.
Okay, welcome back. So, one thing we haven't mentioned yet, which is one of our favorite things to talk about, we made a whole course about it, was identifying your core values. Um, and I think um, one thing I like about this is because it's like a task. It's not like okay, I have to journal every day, I have to meditate. It's like something you can sit down and do,
Yeah.
or you can almost check it off your list.
It feels more concrete, right?
Yeah.
A specific action you can take.
Yeah, like an activity.
Mm,
But you can make a list of things that are really important to you. And maybe it's honesty, maybe it's creativity, maybe it's vulnerability or kindness. And we have talked about if it sounds like this is just totally outside your comfort zone and you wouldn't even know where to begin, to think about like the favorite characters in a movie or your favorite
hmm.
characters in a TV show. What has drawn you to them? Now, if you like the anti-heroes, that might be interesting. But even those, maybe it's their loyalty
Yeah,
or their fierce advocacy. Who
right.
knows?
There's something there that's drawing you in. So
Yeah.
recognizing what that is, I think, is a great place to start.
Yeah. So I think that's one of my favorite tasks to do because it is a task. It's something that you can almost check off your list because once
Yeah.
you identify what your core values are, the likelihood of those changing um, is fairly rare. Because frankly, if you look back through the last, 20, 50, 70 years of your life, in all likelihood, they have been your core values all along. If you were
Yeah.
really, to be truthful when you answer that question.
Yeah. And we're talking about like broad values like kindness, empathy, you know, loyalty, things like that. Those, you're right, Tova, those don't tend to change over time. A few other things, and then we'll move on to being your own hero, is it's important to practice self acceptance when you're trying to be authentic. What does that really mean, though? Like, it feels very airy, right? Like, oh, sure, I accept myself. But you can actually do things to help yourself practice self-acceptance. And one of those things is to celebrate the unique things about yourself. Whatever, like I think of them as weirdnesses because I like weird. Other people might be offended by being called weird. I don't know. But like, what are your quirks? What are the things that make you you? And put those out there and celebrate them and be like, yeah, I learned to play piano. And not that that's weird in any way, but like, whatever it is. I like hiking and I hike by myself all the time or something. I don't know. Whatever it is, celebrate it and put it out there and be excited about it. And then another thing we've talked about, but I want to remind you all, is you can challenge the negative self-talk, right? Like you can literally replace, and that's probably not the right word, you can replace the negative thoughts in your head with positive ones. You can reframe them. And it doesn't mean you don't have the feeling, it means you're reprogramming your brain so that it stops beating itself up, right? Like you still have the feeling. You go, okay, feeling, I'm going to change the way I'm talking about myself to myself. And then you move on. And you just have to kind of do that continuously. Um, Building supportive relationships. We've talked about this, setting boundaries, surrounding yourself with other people who are willing to be vulnerable, who are willing to share their weird, who are willing to put themselves out there. I think that's hugely helpful when you are in the process of figuring out who you are, and how to express that person. I think also becomes a challenge, right? And the final thing I want to mention is pursuing your passions and interests. Much like I just said, like, what are your hobbies? What are the things that like you're excited about? What are the things that make you want to get out of bed on the weekend and go do? And it doesn't have to be like I like windsurfing. You could love movies and there's like movies you want to watch. Whatever your hobbies are, it can help for you to take charge of sort of the story you're writing about yourself when you start to embrace those things.
Yeah, I mean, I am reading a book right now, or I'm listening to a book where it is just a compilation of like bookstore owners and people who work at bookstores and people who sell books and librarians. And it is delightful. I mean, it is like, it feels so good to read and listen to these people talk about not all easy, there's talking about book bans, they're talking about all
Mm.
sorts of things, but they are passionate about it. And I think about and I can't think of his name. It's Christian and I can't think of his last name, but he's a birder. Like I love reading books about people who are passionate about things.
Yeah,
I don't need to know anything about the thing that they're passionate about.
right.
I will go down the rabbit hole with them, which says something about my own personality, but it is so much fun being around people who are passionate about things.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we forget that when we're the one who's the passionate one.
Well, right, because you think, oh, I'm a weirdo. Oh, people are going to be like, what's wrong with that person? Or like judge you, right? Like that's what we're talking about today. We're worried that somebody's going to judge us.
Yeah. Yeah. And having kids is good practice at this. And I'm not encouraging you to have kids just to practice this. Like, definitely don't do that because they're very hard and kind of
Yeah, it's not
annoying
a good reason to
sometimes.
have kids, but it
Yeah,
definitely does help.
it's not a good reason to have kids. But if you have them and like I cry at something foolish and I don't like crying in front of other people, but I cry in front of my kids and they're like, oh, mom. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like, whatever, who cares? And it's good practice to just be like, this is who I am. It's what you
Right.
get as a mom. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. My weird flag flies with my kids so hard. There's nothing I like more than hearing, "Oh, mom." I live for that. I know I've done my job for the
My
day,
new
but
favorite thing is when I use their slang,
oh my God, all the time.
the
It's
best. My 8-year-old was like, I've created a monster. It's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Well,
Um,
speaking of their slang, though,
yes.
becoming a hero of your own story, I
Mm,
don't know that they use that language, but they do use a lot of main character energy. And um, we were watching Breaking Dawn last night, not Breaking Dawn, Red Dawn
Red
last
Dawn.
night. And it was interesting because we were both talking about like who was going to survive from a like, well, he's a main character. They can't kill him off, but also
Mm,
like he has main character energy. And it was interesting because it wasn't always the same person,
mm,
right? Like, and so that group of kids does understand that nuance.
yeah.
Like, he is a supporting character who is bringing main character energy to his role in his life.
Yeah.
Also, the actor's bringing it, but to his role in his life. And it is something that you can do, right? Like there's no small parts, only small actors or whatever, like
Yeah, so
whatever that
small
is.
minds, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like it's interesting that they can understand that nuance, that they understand that um even when you're like obviously in your own life you want to be the hero, but you can bring main character energy, which I like better than like other expressions
Hmm.
that are attributable to like men's genitalia.
Yeah.
Like you can bring that energy to your whole life, no matter what position you're in or what role you're in or what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Um,
great.
it is great. And it's part of the reason, like the nuance you were just talking about is part of the reason I separated these two things out because there is a difference. We need to take another quick break. So let's do that. When we come back, we're going to talk about what it means to be the hero of your own story and what it means to bring main character energy. So we will be right back after this break, everyone.
Hey there, pod family. Have you ever wished you could stay in the loop with a little slice of transformation and inspiration delivered straight to your inbox? Well, you're in luck because now you can. Introducing our fantastic newsletter, your VIP pass to all things exciting and informative. Join our community of growth minded souls. Get the hottest topics delivered right to your inbox. It's quick, easy, and totally free. Just head over to our website at goboldlyinitiative.com and sign up for our newsletter today. Don't miss out on the next big thing. Stay connected with us. Subscribe now and get ready for some big, bold love.
All right. So, welcome back to the show. Let's talk about the difference between becoming the hero of your story and bringing main character energy. They do overlap, in my opinion. but they are not the same thing. And so when we talk about the definition of what it means to be the hero of your own narrative, story, whatever, we mean that you actively take ownership of your life story. You face challenges head on. You make choices that align with your values. You pursue personal growth. And I'm quoting here, you essentially position yourself as the protagonist who overcomes obstacles and drives the plot forward in your own life journey. So you're the main character, right? Like being the hero of your story means you're the main character of your story. And I think this is super, super important when you are a perfectionist, when you are a people pleaser, when you have suffered, pretty real trauma in your life. Not that any trauma isn't real, but like serious trauma in your life. Understanding that you get to be the main character instead of the supporting actor or actress all the time, um, is, I think, really, really important when we're talking about this authenticity concept and when we're talking about writing our own story. On the other hand, and then I'll turn it over to you, Tova, but talking about main character energy, we're not talking about like being arrogant or self-centered or like I'm so important. We're talking about believing in yourself, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about feeling certain in who you are and putting that person out into the world, right? Like showing up for yourself, thinking that you matter, that what you're saying matters, that what you have to say and do in the moment is important. And so one is really about like our self-image, I think, more and how we project that self-image. And the other is really about like owning our stories, right? Owning the fact that we are the person in the driver's seat of our story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to these conversations we've had about who's making the choices in your
Mm,
story. And if you think about, I mean, this whole conversation is about writing your own story and who is the author of your story? Like, are you writing your story or are you letting somebody else write your story? And I think, I have not done this exercise, so I can't speak on it from a personal perspective. But I think about the process of writing your own obituary
mm,
or reading someone else's obituary. And you can read somebody's obituary and see, now some of it just comes down to a really good writer who wrote the obituary, like, but you can see people who took ownership of their lives and brought main character energy into their life, no matter what they did, and were the hero of their own life. And I don't mean people who like ran, were the CEO of a business. For whatever reason, I'm picturing somebody who like participated in their local garden club and
right.
like was the local librarian, like the just did normal stuff
Yeah.
and had a normal, quote, normal life. But it was extraordinary
Yeah.
because of all the things they chose to do with it. And I think about, I mean, we haven't talked about, I don't know if anybody heard, but the Eagles did win the Super Bowl this year. Um, but Kylie Kelsey was asked, I think on Call Her Daddy, about her mother-in-law, Donna Kelsey. And they said, what has she done? Like, or what do you learn from her or something? And Kylie said, as soon as she got divorced, which they waited until the kids got into high school or college rather, um, she just started traveling. And Kylie's like, it wasn't like Ed was holding her back or anything. I mean, maybe he didn't want to travel, and that way he was, but it wasn't like she was like, haha, I'm done, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But it was just like she was like, I'm out of here. I'm doing it. I'm traveling. I'm going to these places. And she's like, so she just shows my girls that she can just do whatever she wants and goes wherever she wants. And obviously she goes to a lot of football games.
Yeah.
But um, but I think that, you know, it doesn't have to be, none of this has to be that you're changing your whole life, that you're changing your job even, or you're changing anything that on paper would look different. Like your resume may not look any different, but I think that you can change how you, I don't know, power your choices or fuel those choices and what kind of energy you bring to that.
Yeah, I think the term a hero's journey is in my mind like a little bit of a misnomer, right? Because you think of hero and you're like, oh, Thor, or like I don't know, I'm thinking of like superheroes at this point. But like, you think of somebody who's going out and like physically changing the world or inventing, a cure for cancer, or like somebody who's doing something huge, which maybe they are. Like
Right.
that could be your journey and awesome. But also like there's the phrase everyday heroes, right? And I think that's so beautiful. And for us to be able to recognize that in ourselves, like there was a bus driver when I was little, and like he would give me a flower when I would get on the bus because I was so like anxious about being around other people. I mean, yeah, he knew my parents and whatever, but like, it still, I remember it. And like that thing that he did and the way that he treated people makes him a hero, right? Like he didn't go
Yeah.
out and he drove a bus. He didn't go out and like, end world hunger, but like he did make a huge difference in my life. Um and so recognizing that it's the little things that add up, right? It's yes, the big advances are important. All these things are, these huge heroic things that people do are incredible and wonderful and important and deserve recognition, but so do the little things. Like you
Yeah.
say, like maybe you are in a garden club and you don't know, maybe you've saved somebody's life being in that garden club because they joined with you and you changed their lives completely. Who knows? Um, I think it's important to recognize that we as individuals impact the world around us in small and large ways that we don't know and may never know. But that is part of our journey. And so when you are yourself in that process, when you are willing to be vulnerable, when you are self aware, when you are living your values, when you are bringing that whole person to the circumstances, it allows all the people around you to see that and either enjoy it or meet it, right? Like match that energy, or any number of other things. It's just so life changing in ways that we can never really understand.
So we had a perfect example this weekend. So this past of ever like literally everything you just said. I mean, we have perfect example. So this past weekend, as some of you may know, the current vice president went to Sugarbush, Vermont, which is where I learned to ski and where I spent 10 winters. It is such a special place in the world and a special place in my heart. So it makes me very annoyed that is where he chose to go. But it doesn't matter. What matters is if you ski, you may know that every mountain puts out a snow report. So each morning, you know, like, okay, these are the trails that are open and this is how much snow has fallen. And it takes a person that has to get up very early in the morning because they usually post that snow report by like 6:30 in the morning,
Right.
before everything's really open, before the lists are even running really. And then they also put it on the phone. There's a phone that you can call into to find out
Hmm.
what's running, what's not running, all that good stuff. And it goes out via email, it goes on the app, goes everywhere. Well, at Sugarbush, the person who does the snow report, her name is Lucy Welsh, and she's 25 years old. And she took the opportunity to write. And now I will probably start crying in front of everybody. Like the most beautiful, um, I don't know, love letter almost to Sugarbush, to the Park Service, to the United States,
Yeah.
and ridicule of the current regime and the money they're taking away from our Park Service, the money they're taking away from the environment, and just all of the things that they're doing that are harming people. And she talked about how she wants to be able to have kids one day and bring them into a world and take them skiing. And she doesn't see how she can possibly do that with the world the way it is. And she said how there are people, at Sugarbush who would want to say these things, but they can't because they need this job for health insurance. They need their jobs to support their family, but she's not in that position. She doesn't need, this is a seasonal position. She doesn't need it. She doesn't think she's like, it's not sustainable that I'm going to get up 4:30 in the morning every day, like forever. Um, and so she felt like she had to say something. And she's like, it's probably nothing. But her words were beautiful. And if she would have said, it's not enough, it's
Yeah.
not enough, so I'm just not even going to do anything. Because she could have said that. She's like, what is this really doing? It doesn't really matter. What difference does it make? she's probably right, but it makes a massive difference because it's gotten thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have seen it. Of course, it got taken down right away, but it went out via email and it matters. Her words mattered.
Yeah.
And it's like when you go to a protest and you made a sign and you're just one person, but when you're one person among hundreds or thousands, if every person there says, but I'm just one person,
Yeah.
like, so I thought the way you were describing the description of bringing that energy to your life and that one choice that she made hopefully has encouraged other people because there are people, many of us, who are not in positions where we can just stop working
Yeah.
or do things like that. And so the fact that she knew she was in a position of privilege and said as much and said, I know I'm going to use my privilege for this, I think is really powerful. But she brings that energy. Um, and I think that, as you said, you don't know where there'd be trickle down benefits. You don't know how you touch a person's life. And it can just be a smile or kindness or opening a community garden or whatever it may be, but it makes a difference.
Yeah. It does. When you are brave, right? And you take a risk. And whatever the risk is, whether it's something massive like the loss of your job, or if it's a small risk, like being, like telling weird, not inappropriate, but weird jokes in a group setting where you've never told a joke before, right? Like those kinds of risks, you don't know what the payoff might be. You don't know how people are going to react to that, but
Yeah.
like it's essential for human growth to see other people taking risks so that we've talked about this and society talks about this at large. Like it's very hard to be what you can't see, right? That's why diversity matters. That's why equity matters, inclusion matters. You can't How do you become the thing you've never seen before? It's so rare. And that's why we are where we are, right? It's so rare to be able to overcome the fact that no one has ever done something before. And so the more we can put people in positions where we see somebody else doing the thing that like we want to be doing, right? And they look like us and they sound like us and whatever, the better. And so, not to make a case for DEI right now, but like to make a case for it, because I believe in it, and I know you do, Tova, that obviously this is why we want people of color in positions of power, why we want women in positions of power, Black people in positions of power, LGBTQIA plus people in positions of power, so that other people can see, one, because it's the right thing to do. Let me just put that there, but also because like how do other people get there if they can't see it? So that's my soapbox for today. I get on the soapbox every time. I try not to, but I do. Um, I think we're gonna wrap it up because we're getting long here. But like just to reiterate, main character energy, right? Bringing that confidence, embracing who you are, owning your beliefs, owning your values, being able to like I don't know, have the uncomfortable conversations. Call out the BS when you hear it. Tell people they're wrong when they're wrong, right? Like being willing to have political conversations with people who are like, oh, I don't do politics, right? But they do, motherhood, which is politics. So said I was going to get off my soapbox and I lied.
Oh, don't worry. I'm going to hop right on it. So you just
Okay,
keep
okay,
it
I'll
out
kick
there.
it over to you. Um, but bringing that person
Yeah.
to the world is essential for change and growth and prosperity and possibility and all of the good things we want in life.
Yeah. So um, I saw a post this morning on Facebook that could not be better timing for this recording. And an organization posted called Heard on the Hill. And I became connected with that organization back in 2018 when
Mm,
we were attempting to deliver a letter condemning the separation of children to all of the members of Congress. And there were some that we couldn't get to in their various districts. So we used Heard on the Hill to help us get to the ones in Washington. And so they shared a post by a North Carolina state senator named Greg Meyer. And he talked a little bit about what he saw in the Oval Office ambush the other day. But and he said, like, I'm gonna stay in my lane. I know foreign, I'm a state senator. So like, but he talked about some things that you can do. And it goes very much along with staying authentic to you, who you are when you are in your life. But I think especially when we are in this trying time and we are in these positions where we are going to have difficult conversations, and we have to have difficult conversations. It is, the only way out is through. So
Yeah.
we have to have these difficult conversations. And it may be difficult conversations with people who are very different, but it also may be difficult conversations with people who are the same, who are like, no, no, I voted for the right person. I just have to, I can't. And it's like, but you have to engage. Um, and he said some things that I thought was really important because, President Zelensky brought some main character energy to the Oval Office. But he said, do not believe them. And that is why it's so important to be anchored in your own truth and your own authenticity, because there are going to be people telling you things to your face that are not true. And it makes you question what you know.
Yeah.
And so it is so important not just to have a community around you, but to be anchored in your own values. So he said, do not believe them. Remain rooted in truth. He also said, do not comply in advance. So
Mm.
I think this is so important because it is uncomfortable right now. It is going to get more uncomfortable. We have to be willing to be uncomfortable and stay authentic, because if not, the discomfort in the future will be so much worse.
Right. Well, it
So,
won't be discomfort.
well, it won't be discomfort. It will be horror,
Yeah.
like actual horror. So,
Dictatorship.
yeah. So sit in the discomfort. Do not let go of your authenticity and your knowledge and your truth before you're forced. Well, don't ever let go of it. But,
Yeah.
like, do not give up. I thought this one, I thought was interesting. And he said, show, don't tell. Now, in his case, he was talking about like, showing pictures. But I think actions,
Mm.
signs, being out there, showing why things are important is so important. Continuing to show whether it's why teachers and libraries are important, why vaccinations are important, whatever it is that is speaks to you, like show why it's important. Don't just tell. Don't use their language, right? So use language that's true to you. Notice that we try as often as we can not to slip up. We try to say diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Hmm.
That doesn't mean we won't always ever use the acronym, but it's important to use the words so that people know that this is not just some buzzword. These are
Yeah.
real words that people are pushing against. Like, what don't you like about any of those things? I mean, I know what you don't like. You don't like Black people and women, but like what else don't
Right.
you like? Um, and then lastly, and I think this is so important, he said continue to care. And I think this is the hardest thing to do. That doesn't mean don't take time outs. That doesn't mean
Yeah.
don't walk away. It doesn't mean put your phone down. But it does mean that we have to continue to care about other people, our humanity. It, in his example, and he had a domestic example in like a community in North Carolina, and the the example was Zelensky, but he said, Zelensky kept bringing it back to what was happening in his country. But we have to keep caring, and I think we have to keep staying authentic to who we are. And for a lot of that means, for a lot of us, and those of you who are listening to us, that means staying tapped into our own humanity.
Mm.
And that means that this all hurts a lot. And so we do need to take time outs, but we can never stop caring. We can never just shut down and say, like, I can't deal with politics anymore. Because it's not
No.
politics. It's life. It's our
It's
lives.
values.
It's
It's your
values.
values. It's what
Yeah.
do you care about? Who do you care about? And how do you care about them?
Yeah. And I
Um,
I really appreciated that post and how it aligned with what we were talking about today.
yeah.
Um, and so because I think it really goes to how you walk authentically in this world right now, and also how
Hmm.
you choose to write your story. This is a chapter. I hope it is just one chapter. I do not want this to be longer than one chapter. It's going to be a long chapter.
Yeah, it's
It's
definitely gonna be a long
it's going to
chapter.
be, it might be like a part. I
Um,
don't want it to be more than that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about homework and then we'll wrap it up because like I said, we're getting a little long today, which is fine. But in terms of writing your own story and what you as an individual can do to get the ball rolling on self-awareness and authenticity and, setting boundaries and all of the things we've talked about over the last 5 episodes. And what I want everyone to stop and think about is, am I the hero of my story? And that, again, doesn't mean am I a superhero out there changing the world by myself alone. It means, am I the person driving the bus that I'm on? Am I the person making the decisions? Am I living my life for me, or am I living it for an idea that someone put in my head? So take a minute, think about what might be holding you back, might be getting in your way, and think about what would it look like if you stepped into your potential, into who you are, like at your core. And what would that look like if you did that without worrying about judgment, without worrying about what other people thought about that person? And sort of journal that out, right? Or at least think about it. Like if you don't have the time or bandwidth or whatever to journal, get the thoughts going in your head about it, right? And then additionally, make sure you take a minute to celebrate whatever you've done today that brings you closer to being that authentic person. Just one thing. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be, I listened to this podcast. You could celebrate that, right? Whatever it is. And, let us know kind of where you're at on social media. You can tag us at Go Boldly Together on Instagram. We would love to hear from you. We want to hear your story. We want to hear what you're doing to live authentically, to set boundaries, to be the person you want to be. And you can reach us, like I said, at Go Boldly Together on Instagram, or you can email us anytime. And we would love to hear from you. Next week, we will be back with another episode where we start our interviews in learning
Yay.
other people's stories and how they got to where they are. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, have a fantastic week, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.
The Power Moms Network, empowering moms to lift the world.